Good afternoon from Helsinki and welcome to the webcast of the Nordic Investment Bank. My name is Niina Rantti and I work here at the bank's communications unit. Today we will discuss how the Nordic Investment Bank assesses loan projects. Last week we made for the first time publicly available a summary of our mandate rating assessment. And what does that really mean? A key part of our operations is economic and environmental assessments of the projects we consider to finance. These assessments are presented as ratings describing to which extent the projects fulfill the bank's mission of improving productivity and benefiting the environment of the Nordic and Baltic countries. The ratings help us to prioritize our lending to investments that take us closer to the bank's vision of prosperous and sustainable Nordic-Baltic region. That's why I have here with me today two of our experts from the bank's sustainability and mandate unit. And you, as an audience, have a great opportunity to join our webcast by sending questions using a box in your screen. But now I will welcome our first speaker, Tiina Salonen, to join the webcast. Tiina is a senior environmental analyst here in the bank, and her presentation will focus on how environmental and social issues are integrated in our loan processes. Remember that you may send questions to Tiina using the box in your screen. Welcome, Tiina.
Thank you, Niina. And welcome also from my side to listen to this webinar. So, as Niina mentioned, today we will talk about NIB's mandate rating framework. It is a policy that the bank uses to assess whether the projects considered for financing support our vision. The framework contains guidelines and tools that we, environmental analysts and economists at the Sustainability and Mandate Unit, use to assess to what extent the projects that we consider to finance provide productivity gains and environmental benefits for our member countries, which are the Nordic and Baltic countries. On this figure, you can see the main drivers that our framework recognizes for achieving productivity growth and environmental benefits. So whenever we consider projects for financing, the projects will receive a mandate rating on the scale which you now see on the slides. The mandate rating will be carried out separately for both components of the bank's mandate. And I will now tell you more about the environmental drivers that we consider in our mandate rating framework. So first, we have the pollution reduction. And although significant progress in this area has been made in our member countries during the recent decades, there is still a need for more investments because the treatment and emission control technologies are developing and there is new types of pollution out there. There's a lot of talk about microplastics, for example, and the environmental requirements are getting stricter all the time. NIB, for example, plays an important role in the protection of the Baltic Sea, and we want to support the achievement of the targets set, for example, by HELCOM or EU's Marine Strategy Framework Directive for the Baltic Sea. So we do this by, for example, providing loans to projects that somehow enhance the wastewater treatment. Second, we have the preventive measures, which is actually the main new component in the environmental ratings of our bank. This refers especially to the area of infrastructure. And although infrastructure in NIB's member countries is already really well developed, there is a need to upgrade systems which are coming to the end of their technical lifetime. And we also need to maintain our infrastructure resilient, for example, by adapting it to the changes in our climates. So typical projects that we are interested in financing in this area are, for example, strengthened electricity grids, sewage networks, and stormwater control. Then as third driver, we have the resource efficiency. This refers now basically to the efforts to develop a more circular economy in our societies. So improving resource efficiency and the utilization rate of secondary raw materials in our societies is important so that we can alleviate the pressures on natural resources and on fragile ecosystems. So NIB wants to support this type of development, and we provide financing, for example, to investments that help to reduce the use of water or raw materials, or they help to minimize the generation of waste. And then last but not least, we have climate change mitigation. As you are probably all well aware, there is an immense need for investments to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases, to increase the share of renewables in our energy generation, and to improve energy efficiency in our societies. Otherwise, we are not able to reach the targets of the Paris Agreement. So NIB's lending in this area focuses particularly on the renewable energy generation, electrified transport, green buildings, and energy-efficient solutions for industries. So, how do we actually rate the environmental benefits of the projects that we consider for financing? As you can see on the slide here, our assessment system includes both a qualitative assessment and a quantitative assessment. The qualitative assessment is based on the sector where the project belongs to. And for this purpose, we have developed a list of sectors where they are pre-rated on a 4-grade scale based on their potential to provide environmental benefits that help to achieve the environmental targets of the international and national environmental policies. And they are particularly thinking about those areas of the drivers that I showed you previously. First, on the high end, we have the dark green sectors. These are the sectors that have the potential to provide the highest environmental benefits. This type of sectors include, for example, the renewables and wastewater treatment. Then we have the light green sectors, which have the potential to provide some environmental benefits. Here, as an example, I could mention some transport modes. Then we have the gray sectors, which as such are not estimated to provide environmental benefits, and we rate them sectorally neutral. Here I could mention, for example, conventional industries and buildings. Then we have the black sectors, which we do not consider to contribute to NIB's environmental mission. So these we rate directly negative, and we do not perform a quantitative assessment for these. Now, how does this work? Basically, the dark green sectors are likely to receive a good or excellent mandate rating because of their high potential to provide environmental benefits, whereas the light green and gray sectors must score well also in the quantitative assessment in order to reach a good or excellent environmental mandate. Then about the quantitative assessment, which is really based on looking at measurable impacts. It includes both local and regional impacts and global impacts. And we weigh these types of impacts on the same weight in the total scoring of the quantitative assessment. The global impacts typically refer to emissions of greenhouse gases, which are a global problem. The local and regional impact, they include, for example, other types of air emissions, like nitrogen oxide or sulfur dioxide or particulate matter. They include discharges to the water bodies, such as nutrients, which are important when we consider the environmental state of the Baltic Sea. And we also try to quantify waste reductions. Of course, there are some cases where we cannot use these type of more conventional environmental metrics, but we have to use other types of indicators. And such things could be, for example, green building standards, added capacities, or efficiency gains. Now, once we have the score from both the qualitative assessment and quantitative assessment, we add them up, and this then provides us the total environmental rating of the project. And as you can see on the slide, it can range from negative to excellent. And at the NIB, environmental mandate is given to projects which rate either good or excellent. So we also use the environmental mandate ratings when we select projects for NIB environmental bonds. So the first criteria to get included is that the estimated benefits should be significant. So in practice, this means that the environmental rating of the project should be either good or excellent. So we are really targeting the dark green investments. The second criteria is that the environmental and social risks associated with the project should be low. And this we analyze by conducting a sustainability review for all the projects that we consider to finance. We perform this analysis based on NIB's sustainability policy and guidelines. And in this review, we basically focus more on the adverse impacts on the environment and also on social impacts. And we benchmark them according to internationally and nationally recognized environmental and social standards. The third criterion for getting included into NIB environmental bonds is that the projects should have a high likelihood of succeeding. This we assess by also making a risk assessment during our mandate assessment. The realization risk provides us the probability that the estimated environmental benefits will not fully materialize. So if this risk is low, it is okay to include the project into the environmental bond. And we also follow up on the impacts once the projects have been completed. And now I would still like to demonstrate you with two examples how the new mandate rating framework for environmental benefits works in practice. First, we have the Henriksdal wastewater treatment plant, which is located in Stockholm. The city of Stockholm is a growing city, and in order to enable the continued growth of the city, they need an extended wastewater treatment plant so that they can at the same time reduce the discharges into the Baltic Sea. So wastewater treatment as a sector would score dark green in NIB's rating system because it is infrastructure that supports pollution reduction. Now on the quantitative side, in addition to adding treatment capacity, we have been able to identify some impacts in terms of discharges reductions. This project will help to reduce the nutrient loads into the Baltic Sea, the phosphorus load by about 40% and the nitrogen load by about 33%. And since they are using new treatment technology, it is also able to remove microplastics from the effluent from the treatment plant. So score on the quantitative scale would also be high, and the total rating for this project would be excellent. And naturally, it would also then qualify for NIB environmental bond. The second example I would like to show you are the commercial properties of Vasakronan, which are also located in Sweden. First, we have Sergelhuset. It is a building located in Stockholm, and it will be renovated for new uses. Then we have the Platinum building, which will be constructed in Gothenburg. So it's completely new, and it will also replace a small existing building. Now, on our qualitative rating scale, the buildings would be considered neutral, so they would basically score 0 points. But on the quantitative part, we would then rely on recognized green building certification schemes. Now, both of these commercial properties are actually aiming for the highest green certificate level, Platinum, in the green certification system LEED. And these type of levels would score also high in the quantitative assessment of NIB's mandate rating framework. So with this positive quantitative impact, the total rating of the project would end up to be good. And also these would then be eligible for NIB environmental bonds. So this is all I would like to tell you about the environmental part. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Tiina, for a very good presentation.
Thanks.
We will take audience questions at the end of the webcast, and therefore you still have plenty of time to send us your questions. But Tiina, can I ask you something now?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Which frameworks or baselines or guidelines you are using when you assess the project environmental impacts?
Well, of course, the rating system that we have developed, there's a lot of data that has been used to establish that one. But especially when we then start to quantify impacts, we are, for example, for the greenhouse gases, using the harmonized framework, which has been developed together with other international financial institutions. We have also been active in the Green Bond Principles, which is a kind of global voluntary system. And we use the harmonized reporting guidelines of the Green Bond Principles. And we also use the indicators for water and wastewater management and for waste management and resource efficiency that have been developed within that network.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Tiina.
Thank you.
And now I will present you our second speaker, Mr. Ville Mälkönen. Ville is a senior economist here at the bank, and his presentation will focus on the productivity assessment of our mandate. So, welcome, Ville.
Thank you, Niina. Okay, I will start with a quote. Productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. What does Paul Krugman mean with almost everything? Well, I and most economists would argue that the basic reasoning is that the more we create value in our everyday work, or in other words, have higher labor productivity, the more options we have in our lives and as a society. We can, for instance, lower our tax rates, increase our public spending where we think it's the most important, or redistribute our wealth between people, and maybe in an extreme, reduce our working time or have more leisure. These and many others are good reasons for us to ask from our clients, how does your investment project increase our productivity? And we evaluate the information that we receive from clients through 4 broad impact categories labeled as the drivers for productivity gains. These drivers are technical progress and innovation, human capital and equal economic opportunities, improvements in infrastructure, market efficiency, and business environment. We use the information that we get from the clients in a scoring model that translates this conceptual framework into project-level ratings. We use project-level parameters to see how the project affects our clients' operations and market position using internal and industry-level benchmarks. Then we take one step back and take a broader view on the project and try to identify if the project has any wider impacts on the economy and the society. We look, for instance, how the project affects infrastructure services, whether it has an impact on human capital development or equal economic opportunities. And importantly, we take into consideration how the project affects market efficiency and business environment, for instance, through impacts on the degree of competition in the member countries. These direct impacts and the wider impacts will be fed into a scoring system that gives each project a rating that lands in one of the ratings in the 5-level rating scale. A critical factor in these ratings is the concept of wider impacts. Wider impacts are usually spillover effects that do not show up in the financial statements of our clients, or externality effects and such. And we put a higher emphasis on these impacts, and that will steer NIB's lending to projects with longer term and more broadly distributed benefits to member countries. It's probably good to work through the concept of these wider impacts with an example. If we consider, for instance, investments in research and development, we know that companies invest in R&D to add value to their product offerings. These investments increase both profitability and intangible capital of the company. In economics jargon, this is called the private return on R&D. Yet, it is well known that these investments can have broader and longer lasting impacts on the economy. And these are called social returns on R&D, which emerge when brains, meaning people and skills, migrate from one workplace to another. Companies imitate the best practices and technologies developed in other companies. And this all means that often the investments in R&D that one company makes benefits the entire business environment or the sector, or even broader sense, the economy. And it may also be said that we might be investing too little in R&D because of this. And therefore, we might be needing some long-term lending to incentivize companies to do more of this kind of investments. And this indeed shows in our lending operations. Of all loans signed in 2017, the same line of reasoning has been applied into our analysis. And therefore, the largest project groups that received financing from NIB were mainly investments in transport infrastructure and municipality infrastructure and R&D, for the reasons that I just explained. Now finally, I would like to show NIB's results in terms of environmental and productivity impact ratings. This shows that over the past 4 years, 95% of our lending volume has went to projects that have reached the highest 2 rating levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Ville. That was a really comprehensive presentation. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
You mentioned that there's a new driver when assessing the productivity, and namely that new driver is equal economic opportunities. Can you tell us more? What does that really mean?
Yeah, it's part of the framework in the sense that we want to highlight the importance of economic inclusion, regardless of socioeconomic or ethnic background, or say gender background. So, and maybe you can see this in a way in a project. Say if we are investing in a early education system in one of our member countries, we know that investments in early education are tremendously important for the development of knowledge for young kids, and it shows up in much later stages in their lives when they go to working life and so on. But what is important to recognize that these impacts are the greatest among those kids who come from less advantaged social backgrounds. So this is one thing that would be highlighted in our analysis in this situation.
Okay, thank you. So please do stay here with me, and may I welcome back Tiina, because now we have the audience question and answer session. And we have received several questions already beforehand, and now I can see that also during this webcast. So thank you for those, and we'll try to answer as many as possible now. Okay, so let's take the first question from Crédit Agricole. And they are asking that, what is the reason for revising NIB's mandate rating framework at this particular point in time?
Yes.
Would you like to take that?
I can take that. Well, there's not actually a single one reason regarding the timing of the revision of the framework. We are working continuously to develop our methods and tools that we use in our work. And then after some time, we've realized that, okay, now would be time to implement all those ideas into use. And also, the world changes all the time. We have to adapt to those changes. The natural environment is changing, and also the economic environment is changing. So we need to take those into account. Thank you.
Okay, and I will continue. They have sent several questions from Crédit Agricole. So I guess this goes to Tiina. Are these updates linked to any current EU policy changes? If so, which one?
Yeah, thank you. That is a good question. Well, of course, when we, for example, have developed the sectoral rating system, we have also looked at the EU policies and how have those kind of environmental policies been translated into our member countries' legislations, and what are basically the targets that we would like to provide financing to, which we would like to kind of help to support achieving. So that's basically in that way included. In addition, I would like to mention maybe the high-level expert group on sustainable finance, which worked at the EU level last year. And when we have developed this type of sectoral rating system, we have, for example, had a close look at the draft sustainability taxonomy of that high-level expert group, and compared, for example, their screening criteria with ours, and see whether basically we have similar views on these kind of things.
Okay, thank you. And let's continue. Will the revised mandate rating framework impact NIB's lending and funding volumes? Ville, would you like to take this one?
Yes. Well, obviously, the funding volumes and lending volumes are correlated heavily. But I wouldn't say that we expect those volumes to decrease because of this. There is a couple of sources where we see new lending opportunities, for instance, climate change adaptation projects and so forth, and also maybe the new views and certain types of economic drivers in the productivity side of our work can open doors for new opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this probably goes to Tiina because it relates to our environmental bond program. And Credit Agricole is asking that can we expect changes to NIB's environmental bond program following these changes? And I guess they regard to changes in mandate rating framework. And if so, which changes should be expected?
Okay, that is also an interesting question. Well, in general, I can say that NIB at the moment is in the process of revising the NIB environmental bond framework. And we are also working on developing more comprehensive impact reporting systems, also looking at the impacts at the project level. As such, we don't see that the mandate rating framework in its revised form would kind of immediately have an impact on the framework.
Okay. Thank you. And then we go to questions from the Nordic markets. And they have quite a long question here, but basically, I guess this goes also to Tiina. They ask that what key considerations would you highlight to the broader market participants as the most important factors when evaluating green projects?
Okay, very good question. I like this one. In my opinion, the most important thing is that whenever you think about the greenness of a project, you really have a look at of the expected impact. And there needs to be some data either on a qualitative side or some metrics in the quantitative sides which shows you what kind of a positive impact the green bonds are aiming to achieve. And that is really important because otherwise we are not kind of supporting with such bonds the achievement of the environmental targets that we would really like to achieve. Okay. So I would say that is the main point. And also then I would always be interested in what are the methods that have been used to assess these type of impacts and how are they going to be reported for these bonds.
Okay. There are still questions coming, and I guess this might be our last one now, but it's again Credit Agricole, and they are asking that is Cicero as SPO involved or reviewing the process?
Cicero has not been involved in reviewing the revision of the mandate rating framework, but Cicero has, for example, reviewed our NIB environmental bond framework.
Okay. And now I think it's time to wrap up this webcast. Thank you so much for the very good questions. We highly appreciate those. And thank you for our great speakers today.
Yep, thank you.
And I could use now this opportunity to remind you that the elections for the Green Bond Principles Executive Committee opened yesterday. So remember to vote NIB. So thank you for joining us and have a good afternoon.